we asked about competencies that are required to strive in that new world of finance with DeFi, it was actually not understanding DeFi specifically, while that is, of course, also important. What seemed to be even more important is to have very strong strategic competencies. Decentralized finance seems to be something very interesting, but then in the larger kind of context of finance, it's actually not very important today. But the question was then, well, is that going to change?
Hello, and welcome to Unfiltered Fintech. And today we're hosting Daniel Liebau.
Hello, nice to meet you, and thanks for having me.
To start off, I was intrigued and interested by the survey of 109 experts forecasting DeFi in 2034. It does sound like a comprehensive look into the future of finance. So my first question would be, what was the single most surprising or counterintuitive prediction that kind of emerged from that survey for you?
Yeah. So before I answer that, maybe I just give like a little bit of information around the setting. So decentralized finance seems to be something very interesting, but then in the larger kind of context of finance, it's actually not very important today. But the question was then, well, is that going to change? So I thought I get this group of experts together, many of them with a background in financial regulation, actually. So not your typical DeFi crowd. And I asked them a few questions about where they see decentralized finance in about 10 years from now. And if I had to answer your question, the single most surprising insight is I suppose that when we asked about competencies that are required to strive in that new world of finance with DeFi, it was actually not understanding DeFi specifically. And while that is, of course, also important, what seemed to be even more important is to have very strong strategic competencies. So strategic competencies would include understanding or being able to make decisions around how to engage with the DeFi ecosystem, for example. And I think that is something that is a bit surprising, because I was thinking it's going to be something around the technology or understanding how all of these DeFi primitives work. But then no, it seems like strategy still trumps that. So that was one very surprising thing.
You co-authored on the topic of DAOs. How do you see or kind of envision decentralized autonomous organizations shaping the mainstream financial landscape by 2034, based on your findings or based on your experience directly?
Anecdotally, when we were writing the book has a subtitle, and the subtitle is basically around how finance can engage with these blockchain-based DAOs, right? And we are taking a little bit of a bet here, and the bet is they will engage, right? But at the time when we were writing, it wasn't as clear. But halfway through the book, very interestingly, some of these DAOs started to procure services from traditional institutions, right? So MakerDAO and Arbitrum suddenly put something out and said, hey, we have some money in our treasury and we want to invest it in traditional financial products. Who can help us? So halfway through the book, we've got our first validation that there's actually something happen at this intersection between finance and DAOs. So that was really interesting. And I suppose the role that these DAOs will play in the future is it can be twofold, right? It could be that they become service providers to traditional institutions, maybe to give access to the DeFi ecosystem, for example. But then at the same time, they could also be customers or clients. And that's what we've already seen in these two example cases. So I think it goes both ways, customer and also service provider.
You said you kind of validated that at the half of the book. By the end of it, how did you feel about your initial assumption or your initial thought?
I'm very proud of the book, I have to say, because we spent so much time on it, and I think it really is written in a way so that financial services professionals who have relatively little understanding of how the inner workings of a blockchain all function can understand things conceptually. And we really wrote it as a bit of a handbook for people to learn about the risks and the opportunities of working or partnering with DAOs in whatever shape or form.
I am personally, and I think all of us at the team, we're excited to see you in Istanbul Fintech Week.
Thank you.
And we don't we don't want to give everything away, of course, to keep a little bit of the
Sure.
right, the mystery. But to the people who will watch this, what's one common assumption you think about the future of DeFi that your research and your experience challenges?
So it's quite interesting. I mean, depending on who you talk to, I get the feeling that people very much operate in their own bubble. So you can talk to people in the DeFi ecosystem, and they will have a particular view around the future. And when you speak to them, often they kind of hope for the demise of traditional finance, right?
Mhm.
It's what in the article that I'm going to talk about we call DeFi revolution, right? Everything is going to run on top of a blockchain thing. And then you talk to other people. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to give a presentation at the European Central Bank, for example. And then people have a completely different view, right? And some of them say, well, maybe nothing much is going to happen, and at the moment there's no traction, and maybe this whole blockchain thing might also go away, right? It's also a legitimate possibility. So if you ask me about the assumption that could be challenged, I think one of the critical insights of the article is that there will most likely be a convergence of the two. That is perhaps something that we put in writing in the article, and is not so commonly understood by the different bubbles that exist.
With this, I think this even short time has been really insightful. So I appreciate it. And I think this serves kind of as a glimpse what will be discussed in Istanbul Fintech Week. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing this perspective with us on Unfiltered Fintech. So to our audience, be sure to catch Daniel Liebau's full speech at Istanbul Fintech Week. We're going to go deeper into these topics and many more. And we look forward to welcoming you, hopefully in Istanbul soon.
Yeah, can't wait to travel.
All right,
I see you
amazing.
soon.